Alright, so we're going to take a look at the concentrated insanity of how I take notes and review notes. And it's split into three parts, which makes sense. One is actually taking the notes, the next is forming them together into chunks, and then the third is reviewing. So let's start with the most obvious part of just taking notes. Usually what happens is I'll read a book all the way through, and then decide that it's something that I want to remember or to review notes on later. Because again, we all know that the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve kicks into effect. Spaced repetition is the only way to maintain learning, blah blah blah, right? You don't need me to tell you that when you learn something, you forget about 90% of it within a day. Unless you have some sort of spaced repetition, either naturally or artificially. So all I'm doing is introducing artificial spaced repetition into concepts that I might not normally come across on a day-to-day basis. So let's say that I'm reading John Haidt's The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, because I am reading it. Wonderful book. I want to take some notes on it. So I'll come into my digital copy here, and I'll find a section that I want to take notes on. Here's a particularly nice description of weird cultures. So I highlight the section that I'm interested in, and I've created just a very simple macro, and all it does is it copies and pastes the section that I highlight into Word. If I've got a much larger segment or words not visible, it doesn't really matter. I highlight what I want, I hit my macro, it goes in, and then Word gets the hell out of my way. I can have it so it all happens off screen or whatever. I'm only having it up here for demonstration purposes. So in it comes, it puts the note, it saves it, it adds some space, and away I go. So, alright, that's fine, but what do I do with that? Well, one of the things I do with that is I maintain a collection of all of these notes. So here's one for Haidt's earlier book, The Happiness Hypothesis. It's 44 pages of notes in Word, about 21,000 words. So, I figure I've taken about a third of the book in notes. Again, these notes are only for myself, obviously. So, what I can do from here is chunk these paragraphs, or any paragraph or note that I've taken, into coherent units, and then store them in a database. So, for example, here's the introduction to the happiness hypothesis, and I'm going to say that these first 4 paragraphs form a coherent unit, about 275 words. Generally, I want to keep these units between about 100 words or less, up to no more than 750 or 800 words. This becomes important to get diversity in the selection when I do the randomized stuff later. So anyway, what I'll do is I'll copy the section that I want to pump into my notes, and I'll come over to my note database. And here I'll paste that in, and we notice that there's a little bit of a problem. Each of these paragraphs come out to a different cell. Well, obviously I am a giant geek, so I've created an Excel macro, and what it will do is go through each of those, put it into one cell, and maintain the paragraph breaks. So the macro that I wrote there adds in a paragraph break at the end of each paragraph while it puts it into a single cell. This becomes important when we extract this out of Excel and back into Word a little later. It also gives me an auto timestamp because I like to know when I took these notes. And then when I'm done and when I have a large collection of these, and I usually pump in about 5,000 words of notes at a time, every few days to a week or so, then I can just put in, this is obviously Psych, and it is John Haidt, Happiness Hypothesis. And obviously if I've got 10 or 15 of these chunks, then I'll just copy and paste down until it's done. Okay, so now I've got all these in a database, and my current database right now, we can see we're at cell 557, so it's quite a chunk. The word count on my notes right now is just over 175,000 words. When you consider that most nonfiction books range in the 60 to 75,000 word range, I've got about 3 books full of just notes on stuff that I thought was important to take. we can certainly, I'm certainly got plenty more to add. I've been fairly inconsistent with this process over the past while, so it's likely that I'm gonna, I'll have 500,000 words in the not too distant future of notes. Okay, so fine, I've got the notes in my Excel database, but what do I do with them next? Well, that's the extraction part I just talked about. So what I did is I created another very simple macro, and it just randomizes these notes and spits them out into Word, and then shuts down the database. So I'll run my random selector macro. It runs the selector, and then we'll open up Word, pump all the notes in, and shut down Excel. I've set it so that it gives me at least 1,500 words of notes, and then anything after that is gravy. So in this example, I've got some psychology notes from the book Brain Rules by John Medina. I kick down, I've got some more psychology from Stephen Covey. This is Covey Jr. on the speed of trust. I can kick down further, and I'll get some marketing material from a Dan Kennedy seminar, some psychology from a book called Happiness, the Science Behind Your Smile. So what we can see here is I get a large variety, and every time I run this, it's going to give me a different random subsample of the notes that I have. So it gives a very good way to randomly review large swaths of material, which helps to form connections between material that you might not have noticed before, and of course is just a great way to constantly be reminded of cool things that you've read or learned or whatever. So that's my note-taking and note review process. It is admittedly a little bit more than a lot of people want to do, especially given that we're not students, that this is just something I'm doing for fun and for my own edification. So, you can take this in one of two ways. You can either take it and maybe increase the amount of notes that you take, or use it to help you get more out of the notes that you already have, or you can just look at it and feel better about yourself that you're not as absolutely insane as I am when it comes to this type of digital organization.